It's your open source advocate, and I'm back with another video, and today I wanted to talk about updating Docker. I get this question on a fairly regular basis where people are concerned about updating their Docker containers because they've had an experience where they've lost their data, where they didn't have persistent data, and it's a concern. I understand that because when I first started using Docker, I had the same experience. I didn't understand how the volumes worked, and I didn't have mapped volumes, and I just ran a command to get something up and running really quick because that was what the project gave. And then I tried to use it and I started putting stuff in it, and then one day I had to restart it or stop it for some reason, and when I started again, all of my data was gone. It is very frustrating, and I completely understand that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what you can do to help you better understand what's going on with Docker and make sure that you feel confident that your data will be there. I want to say thank you to all of my subscribers and all of my patrons over at Patreon. Seriously, you guys make this so worth it for me to do these videos every week. I really truly enjoy it, and I just can't say thank you enough. If you're enjoying these videos, subscribe. Let YouTube know that I'm doing a good job by subscribing to the channel. Plus, you'll get notified when I have new videos coming out. And finally, if you're enjoying what I'm doing, give it a like. Just click on that thumbs up, and that way YouTube knows that you like it, and they'll pass it along to other people that might enjoy my content as well. I really appreciate it. Thank you again. Let's get started. So I've written up these show notes. These will be there when we post the video. But right now I'm just kind of go through them. But really, backing up your Docker containers is an extremely important step. You want to make sure that you are backing up those containers on a daily basis if you're using them pretty regularly, maybe even more frequently, just depending on what kind of data is going in there. If you're using this for a business and you're concerned about that data being lost, then you should be backing these things up maybe on an hourly basis or even more frequently. You should always be doing different backup strategies that work for the types of applications that you're using. Now, I've got an entire video that I made about my backup strategy for using Docker at home, and I've linked it here in the document so that you'll be able to get to it. So when you click right here, you'll be able to get to the article and the topic. It'll have a video that goes with it, so it makes it really easy to do this. So if I just do this, I think I can just do open up in a new tab. It should open up that link. There we go. Now, if you just click on it, it'll open a new tab because I've told it to do that as well. But I've got backup Docker data and configs, and I give you everything about how I structure my backups, how I run them. I even give you a script, and I've got comments added to the script now so you understand what it's doing as you go along so that you can set this up for yourself. So you could take this and copy it, but if you don't have the same folder structure and naming structure as me, it's not going to do a lot for you. But you could definitely take this and modify it to your needs so that you can get some decent backups going. And it's a really great way to make sure you feel confident that you've got your data somewhere. Now, in my backup script, I stop the containers and then create an archive of the data, send it over to my backup system, and then remove that archive, and then I start up everything again. So stopping the containers is one of the ways that you can lose non-persistent data in Docker. Now, that sounds like a bad thing, but actually it's not. It's kind of like saying I'm clearing the cache and I'm restarting my app. But if you've persisted the data properly with volume mappings, which is this next part that I talk about, then you're going to be golden. So I use Jellyfin here for an example, and I show you that I've got this data volume set up that basically mounts their config to my Docker Jellyfin and their cache to my Docker Jellyfin folder. But then my data is actually kept in a separate place. So I've got my media stored on an NFS mount because it gives me much more space for my media. This is kind of that outlier of most circumstances, but I still back up my Jellyfin with configs and cache, and then I back up the data separately in a different backup structure because this is so much data. I don't want to do this every night with my Docker stuff. I want the Docker stuff to be really fast and then back up and running very quickly in the middle of the night while everybody's sleeping. And the next day when we get up to use it, it's there. I don't have to worry about it. But the process and the thought process is the same. If you set up these volume mappings, this is what sets you up to have data that is persisted in your container, because really you're saying I want to map my host to my Docker container. So you're making a symlink of sorts from a location or a path on the host system to a location inside of the container. And the nice thing about that is saying, hey, this is actually being stored on the host. You're saying this right here is going to be stored on my host system. So whenever I restart the Docker container, it still needs to be on my host system. The host system has control of this folder, and this data. The Docker container should not have anything to do with this data that's in these locations. So when it comes back up, it should be able to find all of the data right where it was. So there's some really, really great things about mapping those data volumes and mapping those Docker volumes. When I do my videos, I try to show you what volumes you should be mapping for that application. I try to be really clear about that you want to map those volumes and set them up. I try to show you how to set them up so that you have that backup structure like I show in this here, where everything is in the Docker folder, and then you've got your different applications like Dashy and Homebox and Inventory and Mesh Central and Navidrome and all these down here. And then inside of that, you've got these different locations that you're getting backed up. So when you say I want to back up the Docker volume, it backs up all of these things, but it also gets all of the volumes that you've mapped, which is amazing and makes it really, really easy to use. So it makes it super easy to back everything up. It makes it super easy to keep everything together. It makes it easy for you to feel really confident that things are being backed up. Now, one of the questions that people ask sometimes is, why do you stop the containers for backup? Now, while technically you could do the backup 100% without stopping your containers, if you're like me and you have a family who uses a couple of your containers, but for the most part they're just for you, and you're not using them all the time and you're not constantly making things change, most likely you would be fine running the backups while the containers are still running. But if something happened to be changing right at the right time while you're making that backup, it could create a corrupt file system in that backup. Now your backup is corrupt, and if something else happens later and your container gets messed up and you want to go pull from that backup and you've got corrupted data, it's not going to work. So the reason we stop the containers is so that there's no reads or writes happening when you do that backup. You want to stop that container to make sure that everything has stopped running. Create your archive, start your containers back up, and then you can move that archive to wherever you want once it's created for your long-term storage. So to me, it only makes sense to stop the containers for the backup. It's only a few minutes at most. It's probably more like a few seconds. It does not take very long to do this unless you have a ton of data somewhere. It might take a little bit longer to do that. I think when I run this backup, it takes about 20-30 seconds, and then everything is back up and running. It is very quick, it is very short, and it's worthwhile to me to know that I've got that data, because I have had to use my backup archive. I have gone in and messed with some configs on a container, and then I messed up the container where I couldn't get into it anymore, and I couldn't get it to start anymore where I could change the things that I wanted to change. So I just went over to my backup archive, I unzipped it essentially, pulled out that folder back into my Docker folder and replaced the old one, and just started it right back up, and it was back to running just like before I started messing with the configurations. If you get an update that happens to break something, you can always just use this same backup to go back to what you had, and you don't have to worry about that, hey, all of a sudden I've got something that's broken. So when it comes to the updates, there's several ways to do this. So the first way is the manual method, which is Docker Compose pull. And I love Docker Compose because it's got this really nice tooling. So I want to talk about this really quick, and then I'm going to show you how to do it. I know it's boring to watch somebody just talk through something, but this is important, so I want to show. Docker Compose is tooling that is built around Docker. Now you can do your updates using the Docker command line if you want to, or you can use Docker Compose. So when you do Docker Compose, you can do Docker Compose pull, and then Docker Compose up-d, and you have basically pulled down the new image and updated your system. As simple as that. 2 commands, and you can run them in a single line if you want to. If you don't use Docker Compose and you just have Docker, you can do it. What you need to do is Docker stop, and then whatever the name of the container is. So if in this case, let's say Jellyfin, Docker stop Jellyfin. The next thing you need to do is Docker remove Jellyfin. You need to remove that container. So Docker Compose does all this kind of for you when you just say Docker Compose up-d on a container that's already running. It just says, okay, let me stop it, remove the old one, create the new one, and start it running again as a daemon. So it's really nice because it does all of this stuff in a single step. But in this case, you would have to do Docker stop Jellyfin, Docker rm Jellyfin, which means remove it, remove that container, And then you need to run your Docker run command just like you did before, so that you have the same port mappings, the same volume mappings, and your same environment variables, and get that thing back up and running. Now, Jellyfin is a pretty simple example. This isn't too hard to reproduce, but there are some Docker Compose files out there that have a ton of information. If you try to do it with a Docker run, it would be really hard to recreate unless you saved that Docker run somewhere. So if you are using Docker and run, I highly recommend you save it as dockerrun.txt, just so you can grab it and really easily get it and rerun it. But Docker Compose just makes it so much easier. If you want to pull down a new image with Docker Compose, you go into the folder where your Docker Compose file is, you do Docker Compose pull. When you're ready to bring it back up, you say Docker Compose up -D. If you want to see the logs, you can also do Docker Compose logs -F, and you can see the logs as they get tailed out. So let's go do that. So instead of Jellyfin, let's find one that looks a little bit more interesting. Let's do Vault Warden. I haven't done that one in a while. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go make a backup of my Vault Warden vault. On Vault Warden, once you get to the admin page, you're going to go down here to the backup database section. You're just going to click back here on this button, backup database. So now that I've made that backup, you can see here that I've got the databases set, and these databases are set up inside of the system. So they're set up in my volume mapping right here. So I can grab the most recent one. So it's going to be this one here that says 10.1, even though it's not 10.1 where I live. It's going by UTC. So we're going to copy DB 2023 10.1, and we're just going to copy that to home folder. There we go. Now that I've moved my data back up over and I've got it out of this folder, I'm just going to do Docker Compose pull. So this is going to go out. It's going to pull down the latest version of Vault Warden, so you can see that it's doing that. Everything's pulled down. Now I'm going to do Docker Compose up -D. What this is going to do is stop the current container, replace it, and recreate it and start it back up. So you can see here it says recreate, so it's going through that process. Now you can just do Docker Compose logs -F if you want to see what's going on in the log area here. Up to you if you want to read this and go through it. We can just clear out of that, and we can actually just go check out and see, can we still access our database. So if I click here, I logged in earlier, and you can see all of my data still comes up. And in fact, I'll go here to the Bitwarden app even and show you there. Alright, here's my Bitwarden app. So it's actually reaching out to my Vault Warden install. It's already asking me for my password. And I typed it in correctly. There we go. So I've still got all of my data. I can still log into my server. I can still pull all of the data over, and everything is up to date. I'm on the latest version of Vault Warden. Now you can do that the same way for everything that you have. Now, there's also an automated way to run these things, and I talk here about Watchtower. I've got a video on it as well, and I link to it here in the article. Watchtower is a Docker application that essentially watches all of your other Docker applications. And what it does is on a cron schedule, so you set up a cron schedule every hour, every 30 minutes, every day, every week, whatever you want. It will go out and say, here's all of the applications I see you running and all of the images I have for those. I'm going to go check on Docker Hub and see if I see any new images, or wherever they're hosted from, whatever repo they get from. If it sees a new image, it's going to pull that image down, and it's going to run that Docker Compose up -D. Essentially, it's going to run all those things that it needs to run to update those containers. Now, a lot of people run this just in the wild like crazy. It's up to you how you do that. But the nice thing about Watchtower is that you can tell it, hey, I don't want you to go and actually get the new version and update it for me. I just want you to tell me when there's a new version. So in that video and in that article, I show you how to set up Watchtower. I show you how to set up your email so that you can get an email from it, and then how to set up the cron schedule. And then you need to put a label on each container that you're running. Watchtower will see this special label and it'll say, oh, okay, you don't want to update this. You just want to know if there's a new version. So it'll go out and look and it'll say, yeah, there's a new version. When you get that email, it'll tell you which things have a new version, and then you can go through and update each one that you want to. You can make sure everything was done in the right order, that you've got your backup ready, everything like that. It's really a nice piece of software that gives you a lot of information. It's really cool to run it. And a lot of applications these days come with Watchtower built in, but it only watches their application, which I kind of like. So like for Valora in the game, the thing called Airshipper that runs everything, the server that runs, it has a Watchtower piece in it as well, but it only checks that server container and only updates that server container. It doesn't update all the rest of my containers, which I really like. So that's a very cool way to run it, in my opinion, because you can pick and choose which ones are running it and which ones aren't. You can leave it out if you don't want it to be running. It's really kind of a great option. So there is an automated route for keeping things up to date, but you definitely want to make sure you have those backups running on a regular schedule and that everything is backed up before those automated runs happen, just in case something breaks. And then I've got a section here that says, what if something breaks? The best thing about that backup strategy that I've told you about already is if you happen to get a new image and that container comes up and it's broken for whatever reason, something happens where you just cannot figure out why that is broken. You can go into your archive file, pull out the folder for that container, whatever that is, just like when we're here, when we're looking at, if I was to update Jacket and Jacket suddenly got broken, and I couldn't figure out why, I couldn't fix the problem, I can just go into that archive, get the folder for Jacket, and basically copy and paste it right back into this same spot, and just tell it, start up, and it's going to be right back where it was before I started trying to do that update. Sometimes you get an image that's just kind of weird or messed up for some reason, and then if you try again, you'll get it, and it's the right image, or it comes down properly, or it comes down fully, whatever you need. Again, it's very rare. Docker is a really solid way to run your applications. The nice thing about it is usually it's the project that creates the Docker images for your applications, so you can feel really confident that they've got things working before you go grab the next version. Now, like where I run QuantUX, I am not the main developer of QuantUX. That is a whole different person on a whole different GitHub repo. I really liked the project and I wanted to make it run in Docker, and he at the time didn't have a lot of experience with the Docker, so I thought I'd give it a shot, and I continue to keep it updated. I update it about once a month. Now he puts up updates out much more frequently on his GitHub page, but I update the Docker containers about once a month just to kind of keep things rolling and moving forward. But so far everything has run really well. I worked with him, he worked with me, it was great, and we got things running. But I mean, really and truly, Docker is such a great way to run things if you can just have some confidence in what you're doing and set things up in a way that means you will be successful, so that if you run into little issues, you won't have too many problems. I know there wasn't a lot of show and tell on this one, but I really wanted to give you that confidence to know that if you've got your volumes mapped, if you've got things set up, if you've got backups running, you can very confidently go out there and update your Docker containers and make sure you're staying up to date with the software, because one of the biggest things is that software needs updates. That's how you get security updates. That's how you get new features. That's how you get bug fixes. So please don't sit there on a piece of software that's 15 years old because you're afraid to update it. You're afraid it's going to break. I mean, if you have 15-year-old software, you're probably not running it in Docker, but 10 years old. Docker's been around for almost 10 years. I mean, really, make sure that you're keeping things up to date. Make sure that you're using the tools that are available out there. There might be better tools than Docker Compose or Watchtower, and if you know of those tools, let me know. I know there's Kubernetes. That's a whole different subject, so don't start me on that one. But really, if there's other tools for managing Docker, and Portainer I am also aware of, which is a really great tool. I use it as well. But really, I do a lot of stuff from the command line. It's just the way I prefer to work. But if you can get these things set up and running, you are going to be so much better off. You're going to feel so much more confident about doing the updates, and it's going to make things so much better for you in self-hosting, in your home lab, in your work, wherever you are using these tools. It can give you that confidence that you've got things under control. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please like, subscribe, tell your friends about it so they can come along on the open source journey with us, and I'll talk to you next time. It's your open source advocate, and I'm back, and I've set up a store with a little bit of merchandise. I love being your open source advocate, but I want you guys to be the open source advocates with me. So if you want to, get out there and get some of this stuff. And if you do, let me know what you think of it. Thank you for subscribing.